What's up, guys? Josh Lau here at TheCardGuyz. 2024 has just arrived, and while we're waiting for the heavy hitters spoilers and the whole event in Queenstown, I thought it'd be nice to take a look at, a couple of topics here and there around Flesh and Blood, make a couple, very, very niche videos, but I think, videos that just haven't been made yet. So today we're going to be talking about the ELO system in Flesh and Blood. We're going to talk about what is ELO. We're going to talk about how to calculate ELO, what factors go into ELO, things like K factor, match stakes, expected value, and such. Then I'm going to show you guys a chart, which will basically show you guys the gain and loss potential given the ELO differences. And, there's going to be a decent amount of math in this video. So if you're just, if you're like, Josh, just give me the practical takeaways, I will summarize the practical takeaways for competitive players. So let's just jump into it. Let's not waste any time here. All right. So what is ELO? ELO is a number that can be used to compare the relative skill level of two players in a zero-sum game. So a zero-sum game basically just means that there's a winner and a loser. There's not partial winning or partial losing. Now, that's not entirely true in Flesh and Blood because there are draws and double losses and stuff, but we'll cover those corner cases when we get to it. But basically, it is a number that can represent, so if we have ELO for a player and ELO for another player, we can basically calculate what is the likelihood of player 1 winning versus player 2 winning. And if we're playing a ranked game based on the expected chance that player 1 or player 2 will win, and the K factor, which is basically how much we're betting, we can increase or decrease the ELO of the players and get a running total. So over, 50, 100 matches, the ELO of the player will head towards or should converge towards the actual ELO. Of course, nobody actually knows what the actual ELO is. A number that can change constantly, especially in a game like Flesh and Blood. So like in chess, the only difference is maybe maybe you're slightly better with white or with black, but in Flesh and Blood, if your hero LLs and rotates, right? So that's obviously going to have an effect on your ELO. Anyways, we're going to talk now about the key concepts for calculating ELO. So there are three key concepts that you guys need to be aware of. The first is something called K factor. The second one is the match stakes, or basically what you're playing for. And then given those, we can calculate the expected score, expected value of a match. And then when we combine all these concepts together, we can get a giant chart, which we'll look at in a second. All right, so the first thing that you guys need to understand is K factor. So K factor basically is determining how much ELO is wagered in each match. So not all matches are created equal. In Flesh and Blood, we have 4 tiers of events. So tier 4 events in Flesh and Blood are the World Championship and Pro Tour. Those are evaluated at a K factor of 64. So the higher the K factor, the more ELO points that are wagered. And the K factor is also the maximum amount that you can gain or lose in a single match, right? So World Championship, Pro Tour, K factor is 64. So if two players are evenly matched, whether they are 1500, 1600, 1700, wherever, if they are evenly matched in terms of their current ELO, they will basically gain or lose half the K factor, right? So at the World Championship or Pro Tour, that'd be plus minus 32, right? The National Championship and Calling, these are considered tier 3 events, so their K factor is lower. It is 32 in this case. Battle Hardens, which are tier 2 events, are evaluated at a K factor of 16, and RTNs, Road to Nationals, and ProQuests are evaluated at a K factor of 8. So of note, so tier 1 events such as armories, pre-releases, skirmishes, and stuff like that, they are not rated events, so there's no K factor for those, right? So now that we know what the K factor is and what the K factor is for different events, let's move on. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about match stakes. So basically after each match, the winner will take points from the loser. So if I win a match, and let's say I gain 4, my opponent will lose 4. If I gain 8, my opponent will lose 8. If I gain 20, they will lose 20. Same if I lose 20, they'll gain 20, right? Um, this is the case for a majority of the matches, right? And the majority of Flesh and Blood matches, there is a winner, right? But in the event of a tie, the higher rated player would lose some rating, and the lower rated player would gain some rating, but not to the same degree as if the lower rated player had won the match, right? So as you can see by the formulas there, there's also a third possibility, but this is very, very rare. It's possible for there to be a double loss. If there is a double loss, then there's no change in ELO. I think the only way that a double loss in Flesh and Blood can occur is if there's a double disqualification due to bribery or something like that. But the second case that we talked about, if a match is drawn, that can happen by going to time or intentionally drawing or there. I guess those are the two main ways. If you guys want to know the formula, it is here. But I think a lot of you guys are not that interested in the math, so I'm not going to cover it in super detail, but it is there if you want it. All right, so let's move on here. So let's talk about the expected win rate. So given the ratings difference between two players, we could calculate what percentage of games they are expected to win, right? So in the case that two players are evenly matched, it's obviously 50-50. If there's a 50 ELO difference, it is considered 57-43. And so forth, as you can see on the screen, basically. I'm not going to read it out to you guys. But if you are interested in the formula, that is there as well. But basically, given the expected win rate and the K factor, we could calculate how much you should be gaining or losing based on the ELO difference and the K factor. So that's going to lead us into this giant ass chart here. So let's take a look at that now. All right, so we have a big chart here. Let's take a look at this. Let me break it down for you guys. So up here, these different columns here. So we have different events and different K factors. So RTN and PQ, remember the K factor is 8. Battle Hardened is 16. Nats and Calling is 32. PT Worlds is 64. So we have the different K factors here. Over here on the left side, we have the ELO difference between the players. So we have, the common ones here. I'm just going to list, I only listed out 5 of them, but we have a 0, 50, 100 ELO difference, 200 ELO difference, and 400 ELO difference. I also wrote in, the expected win rate for the players here as well. And given that, we can calculate how much a player will win or lose in a match. So let's take an example here. So let's talk about, let's say there's an RTN event, and one of the players is rated 1600 and the other one's rated 1550. So there's an ELO difference of 50. Of course, this would hold true if it was 1900 and 1850 as well. So basically, this top section here of this, giant square here is what happens if the favorite or the higher rated player wins. So if the higher rated player wins, they would gain 3.44 rating points, and the lower rated player would lose 3.44 points. Now, if the lower rated player managed to win, that's down here in red, the higher rated player would lose 4.56, and the lower rated player would, the higher rated player would lose 4.56, the lower rated player would gain 4.56, right? So of note, this number here plus this number here is equal to the K factor. And then this number plus this number always equals 0, okay? So as you can see, so as we double the K factor, so let's say we go from a PQ to a Battle Hardened, we go from 3.44, we double it, becomes 6.88. We double it again, right? So as the K factor increases, you can see that we're playing for more points, right? And that also means that if, the unexpected happens, and I guess this is something that, has happened before many times is that, you know, at the World Championship, there's a 200 ELO difference, and the underdog manages to win. That is worth almost 50 ELO points. Pretty massive here. Of note that you will always gain or lose at least one ELO. So even if there's a massive ratings difference, you're always playing for at least one. Also, you could calculate, you know, let's look here. So let's say there's a 100 ELO difference. That's roughly basically 2 to 1, right? 64 to 36 is roughly 2 to 1, right? So if we look over here, if you win 2 games, you would gain about 46 points. If you lose a game, you lose about 41 points, right? So, you know, you win 2, you lose 1, you win 2, you lose 1. You basically break even. So if you are playing to your level over a long period of time, your ELO should not actually go up or down unless you are getting better or getting worse at the game. Okay. So let's move on to some practical considerations. All right, guys, let's take a look here at some practical takeaways. So the starting ELO in Flesh and Blood is 1500. If you want to be on the leaderboard, you have to be at least 1550. Currently, 1781 constructed and 1706 limited is considered top 50. And this is how LSS used to, or currently is still using, but soon to be changed, how they give invites to things like the Pro Tour and the World Championship. We'll talk a little bit about how they're going to change it in a little bit. But basically, ELO in this game, from my perspective, I'm not 100% sure if this is true, but from my perspective, and you know, paying attention to the leaderboards, I've generally seen that ELO has begin to inflate. And the reason for that is because newer players join the game, and the higher rated players will basically take their ELO. And generally, the higher rated players don't leave the game, so they're not removing ELO from the system. But you know, if you're supposed to be rated 1400 and your starting ELO is 1500, that 100 ELO points have to go to somewhere, right? So over time, we're seeing people, you know, it's not, I don't think it's going to be uncommon to see multiple people above 2000. Okay. So that'll happen eventually. And because currently there's no ELO deflation mechanism implemented by LSS, now, whether or not they should implement it, I will let them decide. You know, there's been a lot of debate about whether or not ELO should deflate. That does make the practice of sitting on ELO a valid strategy, right? So if you are already in the, you know, top 15, 20 in the world, you don't really have a lot of incentive to go to tournaments where you basically have to go like semifinals or finals to you know, break even on ELO, right? So that has resulted in the sit on ELO strategy, right? But this could change a little bit given that in 2024, early 2024, LSS is going to move towards a unified ELO. So currently there's constructed and limited, and they're going to combine into a unified ELO. And this will be used to give invitations to tier 4 events like Pro Tour and World Championships. So this will start from Pro Tour Amsterdam, which will be in July, I believe. And they haven't really talked about how they're going to do this unified ELO, whether or not they're just going to take the average of your constructed and limited ELO. Obviously, that has some problems. If you play a bunch of constructed, you don't play a lot of limited, then averaging it is not the greatest. They could just, you know, make all of the constructed and limited rated games into rated games and then recalculate ELO that way. But that could be, you know, a lot of back-end work there to do that. We'll see what they do. But just know that going forward, there will be a unified ELO. They probably will have a unified ELO board and maybe a constructed and limited ELO board as well. So you can kind of, I don't see a reason for them to completely get rid of the leaderboards for constructed and limited at the moment. So given what we just saw in the chart there, basically it comes down to this. If you're 100 ELO higher than most of the competitors. So this is going to happen pretty regularly at a calling if you're like 1650-ish. In general, the average ELO in the room should be somewhere around 1550. You basically have to go 2-1 to maintain your ELO. So over, 15 rounds, you basically have to, you probably need at least 9 or 10 to maintain ELO there. If you're 200 ELO higher than the average competitor, so this is going to happen if you're in the top 50 of, so if you're like 1750 constructed or like 1690-ish limited, you basically have to go 3-1 to maintain your ELO. So this is that's a bit of a concern at lower or more local events like a RTN or a ProQuest. Those are actually fairly risky for some players to go to because you basically have to win the event or you're in trouble. Another thing that needs to be mentioned here is that Blitz, LL, and sealed formats count towards ELO just like Classic, Constructed, and Draft. That means, let's say you're very, very good at Classic Constructed, you might want to stay away from a Blitz or Living Legend Battle Hardened because those are K factor 16, and you might not be familiar with those formats to the same degree that you're familiar with Classic Constructed, right? Similarly, if you're very, very good at Draft, you might want to stay away from Sealed because, as we all know, Sealed is a very, very volatile format. And, if you're 200 ELO higher than the average competitor in a Sealed calling and you open a bad pool, you're probably going to bleed a bunch of ELO. So some considerations to look at there. Okay, so I hope you guys have learned a little bit more about how ELO is calculated in Flesh and Blood, as well as I hope that chart, as well as this slide here, has provided you with a little bit more information about how it works and some strategies for utilizing the system. Okay, I hope you guys learned something. This has been Josh Lau with TheCardGuyz. See you guys later. Take care.